you have to consider is asking yourself the difficult questions. First of all, do I need to move to Canada? Why do I want to go? You have to have a motivation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you can answer that question, then you can decide if it's the right choice for you and your spouse or
Absolutely.
family or whoever you're moving with.
Yeah. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have with us Donette, and Donette is from Jamaica and she'll be sharing her experience moving to Canada. She's here as a permanent resident. So before going any further in this video, I'll allow Donette to introduce herself, let you guys know who she is, and then we'll move on.
Okay, so I migrated to Canada in March 2020, right before the pandemic hit. In terms of right before Canada had their first major lockdown, we arrived one day and then the lockdown happened the next day. So it's a very dramatic story and we'll get into that. The drama started from Jamaica actually, because I migrated when Jamaica had its first case of COVID, first recorded case of COVID. So the drama just keeps intensifying. I have a number of years of experience in corporate communications, and that's what I did in Jamaica. And the aim is to continue on that path now that I'm in Canada, and we'll talk more about that later on.
All right, cool. So tell us a little bit about, that drama of leaving Jamaica to Canada, and also a little bit about your preparation. Persons, when you think about it before actually going on this journey, you're thinking, packing up my whole entire life. What recommendations that you have and what you did?
Okay, so there's the pandemic aspect and then there's a normal aspect. There's things that you have to consider generally. So I'll talk about those first and then we get into the unique situation of moving in a pandemic.
Okay.
The things you have to consider is asking yourself the difficult questions. First of all, do I need to move to Canada? Why do I want to go? You have to have a motivation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you can answer that question, then you can decide if it's the right choice for you and your spouse or family or whoever you're moving with.
Yeah.
The other thing is, when do I want to make this transition?
Yeah.
Now, if all of us had that superpower to know what the future held for all of us, then I would not have chosen to migrate in March 2020.
That's true.
I didn't know. So, if I had that choice, I would move earlier.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Generally, you have to ask yourself, how many assets do I have? What am I going to do with all of these things?
Yes.
So for some persons, they own houses, they own lands, cars, that sort of thing. Yes. Make that decision. Do I sell it? Do I rent? No, you want to sell your assets if you don't have anybody to
give it to or
to manage.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But if, let's say you have a house and you have relatives who can collect rent for you and keep an eye and so on, then you can go that route, right? But we've seen many cases, persons migrated, you really have a plan in place for how to manage your assets back home, and houses deteriorate, they get broken into, there's a security issue, whatever the case may be. So you want to think through that. For persons who have children, you want to think about the schooling transition. What age are these students? Are they going to be transitioning into high school or primary school or whatever the case may be? So you want to think about those things. You also want to think about where you're going to be settling. Yeah. For some people, they land somewhere where they have family or where that's familiar to them because they've been to Canada before. Right. And then they might branch out to a different province where there are other opportunities or more cultural safety or whatever the situation might be. So you want to think about that as well. The pandemic situation now.
So on the week of coming to Canada, bam, Jamaica first case of COVID.
Yes.
What was going through your head? What were you thinking? Because there's a deadline to enter Canada.
Right.
You need to meet a deadline and you have your ticket ready, and then
COVID. So we had a plan in place of how we're going to manage the assets that we had. We had sold our cars, but we needed a vehicle to, go around until the last minute. So I actually sold my car at the airport. A friend of mine, she bought my car and I had to let her know that you can't get the car until the very last minute. So I literally jumped out of the car, handed her the keys, and then
Okay,
headed to the airport.
Here.
Yeah, took out my luggage, and then she drove
Mhm.
back from the airport. So the pandemic affected us in terms of all the things that we had set a timeline to do. We had to be crunched into
everything into
in a few hours.
one.
So we were actually in a different parish, meeting with family, saying goodbye, that sort of thing, and then we heard that the first case was discovered near our community. And so we had to leave, go home, finish packing up because we were renting a property then, and so the plans we had with the landlord had to be pushed up a day. So let's say we were leaving the Sunday. This is Friday night.
Yeah.
Right? Persons had planned to collect the final furniture and so on from our houses the Saturday, but that couldn't work anymore because we had to leave.
Yeah.
The reason we wanted to leave, because the community was under lockdown.
Fortunate enough.
They had deployed the army.
Oh my
There was a quarantine situation in effect. The persons weren't allowed to go in or go out. So we really didn't know what the next 48 hours was gonna bring. So we decided to leave the house, go to rent somewhere, an Airbnb in a different community, and then go to the airport the next day. So all of this was, so we had to leave notes on furniture for people. We had to be making phone calls for people to come and collect their stuff and that sort of thing. So we had persons as the point people to
basically
to
make
liaise,
sure.
right,
All right.
to make sure that they left the key with them so they could have access.
Yeah.
It was just a lot.
A whole lot of mess. So head on, really pandemic. Not when everybody get used to this whole thing. It was pandemic, and I guess it was like the first one in Jamaica, so it was a whole thing.
Yes,
scare.
because looking back, persons will say, "Oh, there must have been cases there before," based on the timeline, right? We don't know,
Right.
but the first person who they had identified as being the carrier, that person literally a stone throw away from where we live.
Unfortunately.
Yes, and I can remember I was in the bank doing some final business because that's another thing you have to make sure you have access to your accounts and that sort of thing.
Overseas.
I remember there was a news item on Midday News, and the health minister at the time was saying, this is serious. We're taking it. We're taking all the precautions, and at that time, it's not like we know what the precautions are.
Right.
It was really a lot of uncertainty. I was in the bank, and it was completely quiet. Everybody was just watching the television, trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? So it's tense like that.
Right. Okay. So now we are at the airport. We know that now you will have to, do a COVID test and stuff. But at that time wasn't the case, and you came through. Now you're in Canada. Was anything different or from what you expected, from what persons told you to expect when you arrived here? Was anything different?
Well, first of all, I never visited Canada before migrating as a permanent resident. When you get to Canada, there are two separate processing sections for persons arriving as permanent resident and persons who are visiting. So it was a Sunday and it was really quiet and empty.
Yeah.
I expected, I guess, more hustle and bustle, but that wasn't the case. The airports I've normally been to, it's been a lot of chaos.
I guess Toronto person is usually not really as hustling. Like all the times I came through,
pretty
it
chill.
wasn't as busy as, let's say, when I went to Miami airport.
Oh no,
like
definitely not like that.
No, okay.
Definitely not like that.
And then how was the processing? So when you come, you'll have to go ahead and do your landing there at the airport. Was that any different?
From what I've heard persons say, no. It just depends on how many persons are at the airport at the time if you get in there.
Okay.
So you might have longer wait times. But when we were there, we were like the only persons in our section at the time.
Yeah.
And it was like you're at the bank, you wait until the teller is free and then you go and they just verify the information. The whole thing took probably half an hour.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
Okay, cool. So now we passed through the airport, we're good to go, we're landed, and you know what? We are ready. Let's go get our SIN, our PR card,
Mm-hmm.
our OIP, which is the health insurance. Let's get everything because you know what? The pandemic hasn't reached Canada yet, so we're good to go. How was that?
When we were at the airport, the persons told us that normally you could get your SIN processed there.
Right.
But why it was a Sunday, that service didn't
Yes,
offer
it's
on a
closed.
Sunday.
Yeah.
And I suppose the advice was to go to the nearest Service Canada
Yeah.
and process it there because it can be done a
Yeah.
number of ways. The most popular way is to get it at the
At
airport.
the
when you
airport.
land,
It's easier.
right? Yes,
Yeah.
it's way easier.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case with us. So we said, okay, we'll just go tomorrow. It's not a big deal.
It's Monday. It's open.
I hear it's a pretty simple process, so
Usually.
no worries. We went the next day, but it was just completely chaotic because, first of all, there was a line that extended all the way outside the building.
Mhm.
Then when you got there, you basically waited all that time just to be told you have to go home because you just came in the country.
Right.
So you have
So
to
quarantine.
for 2 weeks and then come back.
Right.
After the 2-week period, when you went back, they were closed. So that's it. There's no, and all the locations were closed
Mhm.
within our vicinity.
So with that being said, how long did it take you now? Because now everything kind of shifted gear and moved online. So how did you process your SIN? And well, not how, but how long it took to basically process your SIN?
Something that should probably take 15 minutes,
Yeah.
maybe a month
Yeah. Before you can get
before
it.
you got it.
Yes.
Because you had to be online in intervals trying to
Access the system.
access the system, because I think at this time you could always do it online, but it was so overwhelming. There were so many persons trying at the same time.
Mhm.
I think the system just couldn't manage all of that at once. So you'd get kicked off. You have to go back on, try to see what's the best time of day. So for the first day, you'd say, okay, when I go on in the morning, it's very busy, so I'll just wait until
Yeah.
midday or wait until in the afternoon or something like that. You have to
Mhm.
watch the trends and the patterns and try to fit your application during that time.
Right.
And so if you have 2 applications to do, so let's say you're here with your spouse or with your
Mhm.
brother or whomever, and yours go through and then the system crash.
Oh God.
And then you have to try again for the other person. It's a bit challenging, and it's very important to get it because you can't work
Right. You
legally.
can't really do. Right.
You can't do anything
Yeah,
if you
you
don't
just
have
have
it.
to wait for it, 'cause
just
you
have to wait
can't-
for it.
I believe you need your SIN to even get your bank account and stuff
Everything.
like that. So it's-
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first 2 weeks was probably trying to get through online.
Yeah.
And then the other 2 weeks is just waiting for it to arrive in the
Right.
mail. And the
Right.
mail was definitely affected by COVID.
Yeah. So I guess that's something to bear in mind if you're moving during the pandemic. All right. So we're shifting gear a little bit now. Now you're in Canada. It's your first time. You have no documents yet. You have no credit score. But you need to find a job.
Somewhere to
And you
live.
need to find somewhere to live.
Right. So with your SIN in hand, then you can open your bank account. You can start looking for a job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, persons will tell you that before the pandemic, they could go to some business places, even though it's not preferred by the
Right.
employers. You could go with
Go
your
and
resume and say,
job,
hey, I'm new to Canada, so on and so forth, and you could get a job that way. That's not the case during a pandemic. Most places are closed, and they don't know when they're going to reopen because it was such a uncertain time.
Yeah.
They didn't really know how long these lockdowns were going to be. So
And then I guess fast forward to being full time in a pandemic, it is still not walk in and here. It's all online now, which it has been moving there for some years now. But with the pandemic, it's full on, online. And what was the difference for you? I guess back home we can do different forms. We can carry it in, we can do it online. But what was that like? Let's talk about, I guess, the job market now. In the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, it was hard. So
and that layer of
different people have different phases, and I guess it's also dependent on your profession too, right?
True.
Like, because some people come and let's say you work as an admin assistant or a medical admin assistant, and you can get a job. You know, it's
a bit more general,
right? But if you are in certain fields like marketing, where you know, I guess they do things different here, engineering, teaching, it's like, what do I do?
The barriers of entry into those professions are definitely harder. The barrier of entry is harder than general professions, and I'll explain why. So first of all, when you come to Canada, you may get a job within a week. That's a possibility.
Yeah, like there are a lot of agencies
definitely, because
here.
The agency culture is what runs Canada. Especially for persons who are new to Canada, you don't really know where to go to get a job, so you have agencies who you apply to be their client, and they find a job for you, and it's fast, right? And it may not be in your field. Most of the time, it's not in your field. It's jobs that require general knowledge.
Data entry, warehouse.
They need people now. It's all about manpower, right?
Yeah.
And so you can get a job like that. It's called a survival job, just so you can, eat and don't have to spend all of your money.
Right.
Which will go fast. Because you're converting from Jamaica.
Yeah, especially from like people with bad exchange
exactly.
rate, like ours.
Yeah. It
ours is
really
just
fast.
really bad.
So
like,
just to make a point on that, some people think that when you're applying as a permanent resident, when the government says you need to have this amount of money in your bank account, they think, oh, I can borrow it from somebody. I can just have it there to show.
No, it's not a myth, guys. It's not a myth.
When you go,
there is
there's
actually,
a reason why.
Right, there's a method to that madness that people say, listen, there's no way I need
all that money.
16,000 Canadian dollars. Why? There's a reason.
But yes, because if you don't get a job and the reality is real,
it is real.
You're gonna have to spend that money.
Especially if you're moving into the cities.
Yes.
Where cost of living
is high.
Ridiculous in comparison to like a $14.50 minimum wage, which I'll talk about in another video, kind of budgeting and stuff. But $14.50 on the renting cost here, and all the living costs, it's
super high. So
it's ridiculous.
If you borrowed that money from somebody,
in Jamaica we said dog name
because you're gonna have to spend it.
Yep.
Right. So you may get a job in a week or so, and that happens.
That happens. For sure. Yeah.
But it's not 90% of the time it's not the job that you want. It's not the job that you're trained to do.
Yeah.
It's not what you envisioned yourself doing.
Right.
So you have to just know that it's temporary, and you get as much as you can from that job while you embark on your journey to find the job that you really want.
Exactly.
So that's the mindset you have to come.
Learn from where you are, where you can start, and then over time we build on that.
Definitely. There's some professions that don't even think about it. You're gonna have to go back to school. You're gonna have to equip yourself with some of the knowledge and skills that they expect you to have here. And it's not that you're not good at your job. It's not that you weren't excellent in Jamaica. I mean, that's not the case at all. But if you're a police officer, a soldier, if you were a lawyer, I mean, those things you have to be certified here. If you're an engineer, that sort of thing, you're gonna have to, it's an opportunity for you. If you want to continue in that profession, that's great. But if you want to completely change your profession, that's also good, because you're gonna have to start from scratch anyway.
Because I know for people that did, I think pharmacists back home, they have to do, I want to say 4 exams, but I'm not absolutely sure. But they have to do a lot of exams to get licensed.
Right.
And I guess similarly for internationally trained engineers, we have to do 4 exams. So it's different for a lot of people, where I guess Canada, you have to do his bunch of exams to prove that, I can do my
like, what you already know.
Yeah. Unfortunately. But so I guess that's the job world.
Yes, some people think that because my certificate or my degrees were certified and approved by World Education Services, that makes it
equivalent.
Yes, to for example, Ontario College Certificate. And In the real world, it is because your skills and your knowledge is the same thing, but it's not going to get you the job that you want.
Yeah.
Because Canada requires you to have either Canadian qualifications or Canadian experience to really be where you want to be. So we're not saying that if you don't have Canadian experience or Canadian qualifications, you're not employable. You are, but not at the level where you want.
Right.
And I mean, it's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. I mean, I had a hard time adjusting and just acknowledging that, because I came to Canada with undergrad, masters, years of experience.
Right.
You know, it seems simple, like a hand in a glove, to apply for another job and to be fine, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
It's the case for a few people, and that's great.
Yeah.
But
Very great.
but majority of the time,
Yeah.
that's not the case.
And I'm guessing, especially if you're coming into the cities, Vancouver,
Toronto for
Calgary,
sure.
Toronto, Edmonton, you know, those big cities, it's hard. Like, it's not as easy. And I guess for Donette, especially pandemic versus pre-pandemic, you know, if it was hard before, it cannot be much easier now, because a whole bunch of people lost their jobs. So on Indeed, there's gonna be 1,000 persons applying for one job because of the, you know, the job situation. All right. So moving from that into, how did you get a place to live? You know, people come in, they'll be worried about finding a place, the fact that you don't necessarily have a job, you don't have all of the proofs that they ask for.
That's a lot.
They ask for a lot. Like, it's stressing, and it's more stressing, especially if you're trying to get into a building versus like a house. If you're trying to get into a house, then it's easy. But if you're trying to get into a building, they need the proper Equifax report. They need this, they need that. They need a lot of things, which you guys will slowly find out when you come. But what was that like for you coming, and would you recommend people, you know, immediately going for a building versus a home, private home spot? Because, you know, the truth is, one is easier than the other.
Okay, well, the real estate market was and still is affected by the pandemic. No, in the past, before this, persons had more options that they could go to a house and do viewings and so on. For weeks, viewings were not a thing, right? And then when they finally became a thing, you know, there were so many precautions. You can't touch anything, and you know, some persons wanted to do virtual viewings, so you could only see photos, and you know, that doesn't tell the full story. That's not the same. So, for my experience, when I finally got to go to houses to look at, you know, things, there's always a thing in the back of your head, like, okay, do I take this property because, you know, the options are limited? Persons who would have normally rented their houses aren't, because they're scared of having other persons in their spaces. Let's say they have an upstairs and a downstairs. The landlord is still living there, and they're you know, they're very conscious that COVID is a situation. And then you just came to Canada and they're thinking, I don't know what the situation in your country was. So, you know, it's a lot of precautions going on there. So when we finally found somewhere, this person, along with other people as well, they were asking for a lot of things, as you said. They want credit score, they want banking information, they want job letter. So you see, the things work. It's a process. Have to get your SIN, have to get a job, have to open your bank account, everything. So those things are doable within a 2-month or 3-month process, but the credit situation takes a longer time, as you have discussed already in your videos. And so if you have that challenge, one of the things you can do is ask the landlord, can I use the credit of another person, like a guarantor or a reference, you know, who can vouch for me? Their credit is good. I don't have credit in Canada as well, because as we know, credit is not transferable across countries, with a few exceptions. But when we're coming from, credit is not a big thing yet, and so there's nothing to really show. But what you can do is, if you have bank statements from home, which actually worked, you can say, I have this amount of money in the bank account. I'm working now, but if anything happens, because I haven't been working at this company, beyond my probation yet, or whatever the situation is, it's part-time or whatever. This is where I get my income from, and so you can have the converted figure, so they know, oh, this person has some money, so I can, because that's their fear, because tenants have a lot of rights in Canada,
right?
So they don't want to rent their house to somebody that can't pay the rent, and then I'm stuck with this tenant.
And that is where that 16,000 come from that they ask you for.
That
so
should
you have it to show.
Right?
Yeah, that's exactly where it comes from.
As to whether you should go for a building, or when we say a building, we mean like an apartment building or a condo or so on. It's different. It's more challenging to get into those buildings, because you're not just dealing with the landlord.
No,
it's not. Some things are not up to his or her discretion. Some things are building standards, province standards, and so sometimes you just don't meet it yet. You will in a few months, but you just don't meet it yet. So sometimes you have to start in a, let's say, a house situation, and then when you get the number of pay stubs that you need, and credit and that sort of thing, then you can go to a building. One of the things with a building, which it takes a whole lot of video to explain, but one of the things you should know, you should get your paperwork in order from before you start.
As the realtor, sometimes, especially in the pandemic, before the pandemic, I guess you could, but in the pandemic, they don't just let you view people places without having
certain
all the documents. They need to be checking your
Yeah.
credit. If something is not right, you best believe that they're not gonna allow you to see it. And I guess it would be the same with condos and apartment buildings. The difference between condo and apartment is that the apartment buildings are generally owned by a management, whereas the condos are owned by persons. Like I own the condo and I'm renting it, but they normally go through a realtor instead of just a random man, doing their property.
Yeah. And the process goes fast. Once you really get through to a realtor, or if you're doing it by yourself, the landlord can say, okay, I'm interested in this person. And if you don't have all your things in place, then it's going to be a challenge for you. So the recommendation is to get all your stuff together, try for a house first, because it might be easier to get through that way, and then when you feel like you have accumulated as much as you need, then you can try for a building. Definitely.
So I guess one of the things that people don't talk about a lot, but it's a big thing here in Canada, and it's associated with their mental health, is the feeling of social isolation, especially coming to Canada. Even if you're coming with a spouse or you're coming with a family member, there is still winter depression, especially coming from tropical countries, and just not being able to, network, and not being able to, it is not the same. I'm seeing your eyes, and what was, I guess, the question is, what was that like, and what can people expect?
Well, I think the question should be, what is that like? Because
we're still in the pandemic. It's not post-pandemic yet. My correction. Yes.
I mean, I say that as present tense because I still struggle with that issue. I think they call it seasonal affective disorder, something of the sort. Yes, I've heard about it before, but you can't imagine what it's like until you're in it.
That's true.
Honestly,
that is
you
so
can't
true.
read about it, you can't hear about it. You have to experience it, because you will feel not just, it's not just the fact that you can't really interact with people as much as you used to. Because I used to have a very social life, like going out and a bunch of people, and it's just not the same here, because you come to a new country. That's one, you're not gonna know a lot of people. Two, the people who you do know, they can't just drop everything and babysit you. Like you have to figure out some things on your own. They have their lives to live also. The other thing is, because of the pandemic, and you can't even see an entire face. You're just seeing eyes and forehead, and then in winter you're just seeing eyeballs, because you have to cover up from. It's unreal, really. So normally you have those facial cues, that sort of non-verbal communication that you can work with. There's none of that. Unfortunately. And it's easier if you knew the person from before, because I know how Sanjay normally behaves. But if I'm just meeting you and all I have to go off is it's rough.
Yeah.
So that's one, not being able to meet and greet and socialize with people. I think we're all zoomed out by now. I mean, there's so many Zoom meetings, Zoom calls, and all of that. And even when you're having a social event, it feels like a work event.
It does.
Because it's the same media.
Well, I had this one Zoom meeting at work where we did.
Fun?
It was fun because we did, what's it called again? You know, like when you go into like a mystery room and you try to figure out the mysteries going along.
Oh.
We did a virtual escape room.
And you pulled it off?
Yes, we did. It was so fun. But anyways, moving on.
But it's hard.
It is.
It's hard to pull it off.
It is difficult. I was impressed. It's difficult.
It's difficult. So social isolation in a pandemic is real, but it exists outside of the pandemic, right? Because if you're from a tropical marine climate country, to begin with, like Jamaica, it's just sun or rain. There's no winter, there's no fall, there's none of that. And to be honest, they say that there are 4 distinct seasons here in Canada, but I don't see it. I just see winter and I see summer. Yeah. And the summer is like this short, and the winter is like this long. It's not equal at all.
Except this past fall, which was pretty long. So
listen, when you have been in Canada for an extended period of time, I think it doesn't affect you as much in terms of the cold. But when you just come, but when I mean just come, I mean the first 2 years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's true. And I guess it takes like a worse toll on you, like especially when things are not going how you want it to go. Because my first 2 years. But you get my picture. Like you have to be mentally prepared. I don't even think you can be so mentally prepared. But especially when things are not going well and you have some small windows and you can barely see anything and outside dark and you're like, you know what, this is not good. So for me, like now I try to have a lot of green. So if I'm working over there in the office and I know that put something green, so if I'm glimpsing, I see it a little bit. I find that works. Timmy agrees. So, I try to do that a little bit more.
What I think the biggest contrast is when you're in a country like Jamaica, we have a lot of houses with verandas, we have access to outdoor spaces. Yeah. Sometimes in Canada it can be difficult to access outdoor spaces depending on where you live. If you're in a building, you have to take the elevator, you have to go up some stairs. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Sometimes you might have windows, but what you're looking at isn't really
nothing. Cars.
Another building.
Snow.
And then in snow, it's just white. And then
people,
snow is only beautiful when it just falls, because after a few hours,
I'm no longer impressed. I can say it. I'm not impressed.
It gets dirty and it gets gloomy. I think one of the things that affected me, and I have to be conscious of it now, is gloomy days when there's no sun. Because sometimes in winter there's sun and it's really nice. But sometimes there's no sun. It's just cloudy. It's just gloomy. It's one of those days you just want to be in bed. But when you have like all of these days for 3 months, you can't be in bed for
exactly.
It takes a toll on you because you feel sad, you feel depressed, and you can't even articulate why you feel sad. But then when you couple that with some of the things that you were talking about, I'm not in the job that I want, I'm not making as much money as I want, you start thinking to yourself, okay, did I make the right choice? And so that's at the beginning when I said you have to decide why you come in the first place.
I think that's really a sound advice. I think that's the biggest thing too, right? Like, if when it gets hard, you have something to say.
It's your anchor.
My motivation. It keeps you going, especially in those, hard times. I remember when I just came, and it was the same thing. It's a process. Let's just sum it up, saying it's a process.
Be patient with yourself as well. Yeah. Because you don't know how long it's going to take for you to actually feel better, to get the things that you want. So don't put a timeline on it. It's been 6 months, why don't I feel better yet? Trust me. Just relax.
above the
Yeah.
waters or above the snow.
Yeah.
All right. So we have spoken about a lot, especially coming here during the pandemic. But there must be something good about this place. What is it?
There are many things
Yeah.
that's good about Canada, which is why there's so many persons here
Coming, right?
What I appreciate with Canada is I think the layout of the city that I live in, and I think that's the case for some of the other ones. There's urban thinking.
Yeah.
There's a thought process behind urban development.
Yeah.
And so even though you have a congested city, there are green spaces that you can appreciate.
Yeah.
There's a park like every few meters that you have access to, and it's very important. So you can go, you can ride a bicycle, you can play tennis, you can, and your access to these things are free.
Yeah. And I find that, Jamaican people were really nice people, but I think a lot of persons here in Canada, they're also very nice. And the interactions, even, I guess some people will say, oh, it's not real, it's fake or whatever. But for me, I appreciate it to some degree, especially when you're being real. Because for us back home, if somebody don't like you, right away, you will know if somebody in Jamaica don't like you. But I think one of the good things that I found in my transition, and you probably have the same too, was our church body. For persons that are religious. For me, I was looking forward to going to church on Sundays. Like, I used to take the bus and waited for somebody to pick me up. And it was freezing. I didn't have the proper shoes. And I was there for like half an hour. And I'm like, I'm going to church because I had that family away from home. I had that support system that I really appreciated, like my pastor and his family, they were always there. And it kind of helped. So I think, I wouldn't say it really definitely attributed to Canada, but that's a good thing. That's something good that I found.
Yeah, I think I got that advice from somebody before I migrated here, and it's really true.
Yeah.
You should definitely rely on those networks.
Yeah.
And churches are a really big one, because within the church you're gonna have persons who work at different places who will have the scoop on where the jobs are.
Yeah.
You'll have people who will invite you over and say, oh, let's come over for dinner,
let's hold me vibe.
Right. You can plan things together, you can get involved at church actually, so that you can have your talents go to and in Canada the employers really value volunteer experience. So if you are a part of a church, especially a big church, and you can volunteer your time there, it can count towards, you know.
Especially if you are applying for jobs, like Salvation Army, it would be definitely a push, because Salvation Army here is a whole big organization, marketing, everybody can work at Salvation Army. So it would be good experience not working, but volunteering with the church and, blessing them with your services. So that's something that I appreciated too. And the health system.
Oh yeah, like Canada isn't known for anything else.
I know.
I mean, it's a hard feat to pull off free healthcare.
I know.
It's a very complex situation.
Yeah.
But I found that in Canada, they've managed to do a really good job of it. Unfortunately, I've been sick while I've been in Canada. Never been sick in Jamaica, but hey, I came to Canada. So I have experience with hospitals, and I found that the healthcare system is really good.
Yeah.
It's really good. From getting, admitted to leaving to follow-ups.
Right.
They're pretty thorough. And I can appreciate that.
Yeah, I think people really do take their job seriously here. And I guess it's not really just the health care. I find that people will follow up if they get a missed call from you or stuff. So that, I guess the health system is one of those big factors that people should consider. So I believe we both gave you a lot to think about, pros and cons, and Donette, of course, shared some really key gems that you need to know when coming and you need to really think about. And Oh, if you need support, Donette writes a blog, and if you enjoy reading, she'll be sharing her basically experience here in Canada with you all. So it will be a form of support system. Donette, do you mind sharing the blog, the name of the blog, so that they can find you? And I'll put the link below as well.
All right. So the blog is Settling in Canada, and the URL is lifeincanada.style. And Sanjay will share more information about that in the description.
Yeah.
But I found that it's an outlet for me. So writing might not be your thing, but you might be painting, it might be playing music, it might learn in a new sport, whatever it is. There's lots of stuff you can learn to do. But I found that writing is a therapeutic outlet for me. And so I started the blog because I had so many learning experiences. There's so many things that were new to me, and I thought to myself, wow, like other people would really appreciate that information as well. And so I started writing about things.
All right. Yeah, I hope this was a very useful video for you, and as usual I have more coming, so subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and share it with your friends and family. Like it, comment down below, and of course hit the notification bell so you will be notified once I post a new video.